Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel. Today we're going to be making a sea salt soap with you guys. We're going to talk about what constitutes a sea salt soap and exactly how to make it. So let's get right to it. Okay, so what makes a sea salt soap different than other kinds of soap? Basically, a sea salt bar has a ton of salt added to it. We're actually going to be adding this much salt. I don't know if you can tell, but this is half of our oil weight in salt. So these are our oils, and this is basically half of the weight in sea salt. And so a sea salt bar is really different than other kinds of soap because of all the salt in there. And one of the ways to accommodate this much salt is to use a lot of coconut oil. And the reason you have to use a lot of coconut oil in a salt bar is because the coconut oil is the only thing that lathers with sea salt. So in other words, if you use other kinds of oil, you might end up, and you use this much salt, you might end up with a bar that doesn't lather very well at all. And so in order to make sure that the bar lathers with this much sea salt in there, you do have to use a lot of coconut oil. So this oil blend that I have right here, which I already measured in advance, is very high in coconut oil, and it also has a very high superfat. So we're using a high superfat because we want to make sure that the bar isn't too drying. Oftentimes when you use a high percentage of coconut oil, then your bars will be very drying. And this is one of the issues with a lot of handmade soaps, is that coconut oil percentage is high, which leads to a really drying bar of soap because coconut oil adds to the cleansing properties in your bar. So if we add the superfat, then what that means is that we're going to have more oil in that bar that's kind of free floating. It hasn't reacted with the lye. And so that's going to compensate for some of that drying effect because we're going to have some of those extra oils sitting on our skin. So this is a high percentage of coconut oil. We're going to have 50% sea salt. A sea salt bar can be anywhere between 50 and 100% sea salt based on the amount of oil that you have. So for example, if you have 60 ounces of oil, then you would use between 30 ounces and 60 ounces of sea salt in your sea salt bar. That's kind of the definition of a sea salt soap. There's other kinds of sea salt types of bars. There's brine bars, which is where you add the sea salt to your lye water, although you add a lot less sea salt to your lye water. And then you can also add things like sodium lactate to help harden your bar, just add sea salt to help harden your bars for an easier unmolding experience, but those are different types of soaps. So this today is a sea salt soap. This leads to like an extremely lovely lather that is really rich and creamy, kind of a lotion-like lather. If you've never used a sea salt bar, you should definitely try this out. Anyway, let's just dive right in. We have all of our oils here. We have our sea salt already measured and ready to go. We have our lye water. We have aloe vera. By the way, this is 50-50 lye water. If you haven't watched our videos on 50-50 lye, make sure to check it out. Basically, it's half water, half distilled water, half sea salt. Sorry, not sea salt, half distilled water, half lye. Then this is the other part of our liquid. We're using a 2-to-1 water to lye ratio. So this is our aloe vera. And then here we have our essential oils. And you'll see our essential oils have this beautiful orange color. This is a citrus blend. So there's grapefruit and orange in here, which results in this really lovely color. So we're not actually going to add any color to the soap today because we actually get a really nice yellow color. And I didn't even tell you what soap we're making. We're going to be making citrus sea salt. So this is a citrus blend. We're doing a sea salt bar. We're going to be using these molds right here. And we're actually going to be making this in a larger container. And the reason is that once we add all of our ingredients to this bucket, it's going to be almost completely to the top. And once you add the sea salt, there's no room left in this bucket. So we're actually going to transfer these oils into this container. And let's see, then we're going to pour it into our molds. We also have some additional molds because this recipe will yield a little bit more than what these molds can hold. So we have some of these cavity molds that we're going to use. And since we're going to be putting the soap in the oven, because we're going to be doing an oven process method today with our sea salt bars, We are also going to put our molds onto a cookie sheet like this. This just allows us to be able to carry these easily over to the oven, and then they can sit in the oven easily as well. So make sure that you do that if you have cavity molds. Now, one thing that's unusual about salt bars is that they set up super quickly. So you definitely want to make sure that you're around to unmold them as quickly as possible. Not as quickly as possible, because you don't want to unmold them right away, but you want to unmold them typically within an hour or so. So you'll make the soap. You can either let it sit in here for an hour and kind of keep checking on it to see when it's ready to cut, or what we like to do is to put it in the oven. So we'll hot process the soap, we'll put it in the oven for a little bit, and then we'll take it out, and then once we see a full gel, which I will also talk about later in the video, then it'll be ready to cut. And salt bars get very, very hard because of the high amount of salt. So that's why you want to make sure that you cut at exactly the right time if you're making your salt bars in a loaf mold. If you're new and have never made salt bars before, you may want to try just making them in these cavity molds, because when you make them in here, you can just let them sit. I would probably let them sit for 48 hours so that they really take on that imprint of the mold really nicely. And then after 48 hours, you just pop them out and they're ready to go. So this technique with the oven is really useful if you're making your salt bars in a loaf mold. Okay, let's get going. I'm going to put on all my safety equipment. We're not really going to pour the lye right now, but I still like to have all this stuff on. Okay, so we're going to stick our stick blender into our oils. And this has been sitting here for a little bit, so I'm just going to blend it up. I'm going to take a temperature reading. We're at 99.5. And once we add all of our other ingredients in here, that's going to go down a little bit. So I'm going to add in my aloe vera. This is aloe vera juice. Again, this is an additional liquid. So a lot of people, when they make their lye solution, they'll do water and then their lye. We do a 50-50 ratio. So equal amounts water, equal amounts lye, and then the remaining water is something else typically. We do use distilled water sometimes as our something else, but typically it's aloe vera, goat milk, coconut milk. So this is a way to add additional liquid and still be able to use your 50-50 lye solution. And we just stick it right into our oils. The other thing we're going to put in here is our essential oil blend. And throw that in. Make sure to scrape it out really well so you get all the goodness in there. Okay. It smells so good. By the way, this recipe will be available on our website. And if you have pre-ordered my upcoming book, you can get this recipe for free, but you have to do it before May or by May 27th, because the book comes out on May 28th. So this is like a pre-order incentive. I'll put details on all that stuff in the description box below. All right, so we have all our ingredients in there. That was super easy. Basically, we've got our oils, our essential oil, and our aloe vera in here. Give it another quick blend. All right, we'll take another temperature reading. Now we're at 92.6. So that's a really nice temperature for soap making. Okay, as I mentioned, we're gonna take the oils in our bucket, everything that's in our bucket, and we're gonna put it into this container. Now, the reason we didn't blend everything in this container to begin with is because we actually pre-measure our oils out in these buckets. But what I'm gonna do now is just toss it all in here because I know that the salt is gonna take up a lot of room. Okay, actually, I can just stick that in there. Don't even need to clean it off. All right, here we go. This is kind of an optional step. You don't really need to transfer from one bucket to the other. This bucket here that we have fits in our microwave really easily. It's you know, just a lot easier to measure out of here than it is out of this bigger square bucket. Okay. So this is a step we really only do with these salt soaps. We also do it with our calendula bar because we add a lot of calendula to our soap and it doesn't all fit in this particular bucket. All right, so we've got everything transferred over. So now all that's left to do is to put in the lye, and then once the lye is in, we're at a thin trace. We're gonna add our sea salt. I like to talk about everything in advance so I can kind of remember what I'm supposed to be doing and sort of put away everything we don't need anymore. Then we're gonna pour that batter into our loaf molds right here. I've got 2 of these, and this recipe will hold these 2 loaf molds exactly normally, but because of the addition of sea salt, we're gonna have extra batter. You could recalculate this recipe so that it fits in the loaf molds perfectly, but I love having the extra sea salt batter because then I can make other soaps in the cavity molds. So the molds that we have, they're actually super cute and it's hard to see on camera, but these are from Brambleberry. And this is a little seashell mold, which kind of goes with our sea salt theme. And then this one is a, what are these little shells called with the little star in it? Gosh, I forget now. Anyway, we got some of those too. And we also have some heart molds. All right. So our batter looks good. I'm going to check the temperature of the lye water actually before I start. Our lye water is at 99 and our oils are at about 92, 93. So that feels pretty good. All right, let's get going. All right, let's get all our lye in there. The batter actually already changed. You probably didn't see it on camera, but it already changed to kind of a darker yellow as soon as we added the lye in. Okay, all the lye's in there. I'm not used to using the square bucket, so I prefer a round bucket usually, but this is a good size for this purpose. For those of you that are new to soap making, as soon as you add the lye, this starts to saponify. Basically, the lye and the oils are turning this into soap. And so what's happening is that this batter is thickening up. And one way to check how thick it's getting is to check for trace. Trace basically means that when you take your spatula and you drizzle the batter over top of itself, you can kind of start to see that the batter either sinks right in or stays on top, or kind of stays on top for a short amount of time and sinks back in. And this is something you get used to after a while when you're a soap maker, kind of figuring out what trace you should be at. And there's also some clues with the color of the batter and just the consistency of it. So when you're blending as a new soap maker, make sure you're paying attention to all this. Stop blending, kind of check for your trace. Don't overblend, which is very easy to do. It's better to go slow and underblend and then just stir like I'm doing now or with your spatula to try and get your batter to thicken up sort of naturally. Okay, so this feels pretty good. Basically, you want to make sure that this is emulsified. You want it to be, you know, have the oils and lye incorporated, but you don't want to have it be too thick. All right. So now's the time to add the sea salt. So we've got our batter to a light trace. And instead of dumping all of this in at once, I'm going to go kind of slow. Do about half. By the way, it's really nice if your salt is not clumpy when you weigh it out, just make sure all the clumps are out of there, because you don't want any clumps in your soap. This, by the way, is fine sea salt. I prefer to use really fine sea salt so you get less exfoliation and more of that hard bar with creamy lather feel. Okay. Do a little more. Little bubbles kind of pop up while you're doing this. I'm not sure why that is, but I'm sure there's a scientific explanation. Probably just the air that's in the salt is bubbling up to the surface. That's totally normal. So this is why it's important for your trace to be pretty light at this point, because it does take a little while to incorporate all this sea salt. You do want the sea salt to kind of be suspended in the batter because you don't want all of it to just drop to the bottom. You want to be able to have a consistent amount of sea salt throughout your entire bar. Okay, this is the last of it. Now, a lot of sea salt soaps will set up really quickly. This one doesn't. It's probably because of the types of essential oils used in here. It's a lot of citruses, which don't really accelerate trace at all. So what I like to do is just give this a little bit of a stick blend just to make sure it's all really incorporated and that any clumps or anything are really taken care of. Okay, I can see that this is starting to thicken up. All right, put that aside. We're done with our stick blender. All right, so now we're gonna pour this into our loaf molds and then we're gonna pour it in the remainder into our cavity molds. One thing that's nice about the square bucket is that you can pour from the corner. Move that out of the way. I'm just gonna clean this up so I don't get things too messy. Okay. I'm going to fill these all the way to the top. Look at that nice color. All right, that's one. We'll do the next one. Okay. There we go. Like I said earlier, we're going to put those in the oven. And we're also going to put our these molds in the oven as well. Putting them in the oven just makes sure that they get a nice full gel. So these are the seashells. Sand dollars. That's the name of the other mold. I don't know why I couldn't remember that. So we got some sand dollars here. Okay. Tap these down a little. I probably filled them a little too high. Here's a little trick. If you put your molds right next to each other, you can kind of smooth them out and get this into the next one. Okay. I probably should have used a little bit of parchment paper under these because I don't know that I'm too keen on the batter hitting my cookie sheet. I did think about it before recording and then promptly forgot. Okay. So these pretty full. So I've got the oven in the house. It's not out here, unfortunately. It's set to 170, which is the lowest temperature that the oven goes. And in the information for this recipe, I explain exactly how to do that process with the oven. But basically, if you're used to, it's called CPOP. A lot of people call it CPOP. Basically, that means cold process, oven process, which means you do cold process soap, but then you oven process it afterwards. And that can help force gel. I mean, it's useful for a lot of purposes. Okay, so there's that one. And still got a little bit of batter left. I'm not going to put these ones in the oven, mainly because I'm interested to see what the color difference is going to be, but also because there's no room on my cookie sheet. So you definitely want to make sure that your molds fit on the cookie sheet before you start filling them up. Okay. Looks like I'm just going to get one heart mold. Sea salt soaps are actually really, really nice in a cavity mold because the cavity mold creates really nice edges for the bar. So you'll have these really nice smooth edges on your bar and then just that one kind of rough side on the bottom. All right, so we got one heart that's gonna stay out here. And the rest of these we're gonna go put in the oven. So come along with me. I'm gonna take you to the oven. We're gonna put these in and then we're gonna let them sit in there for a little bit. And then we're gonna come back again later to cut all our bars together. We'll be back. All right, here we are in my kitchen. We've got the stove going. It's set to 170 and I'm gonna pop these molds in. By the way, you wanna make sure that the rack is set to the right place before you get your soap all made. Okay, so I've got the 2 molds in there and here's the cavity molds. We're gonna put those in there too. And close the oven. And there we go. We're gonna put these babies to bed for a little bit and then we'll be back to show you what they look like when we take them out. All right, friends, so our soaps have been sitting in the oven for a little while. We're gonna take them out right now and set them on the countertop and I'll show you what to look for when we are kind of looking to see when they'll be ready for cutting. So I'm gonna put my goggles on just because the soap still is saponifying. And also sometimes if you're making something with peppermint or eucalyptus or something like that, you do want to be careful when you open the oven door because sometimes you'll get like a blast of minty eucalyptus, which can sort of burn your eyes. So keep that in mind. All right, here we go. Let's see how these look. It smells so good. All right, here's our first loaf. Put that right here. Get our second loaf. Now these are warm, but since the oven was only set to 170, they're not that warm. I kind of like to put them together. And then, ooh, that one's a little hot. So I'm gonna get my, these are our cavity molds. I'm just gonna put those here. All right, you don't have to worry so much about the cavity molds because these ones you can unmold at any time. The reason that we put them in the oven is so that they gel really well and they'll probably be a brighter yellow color than the mold that we left inside the studio. Okay, so for these ones, basically as these sit here, I'm probably gonna leave these here for about 45 minutes. As these sit, they're gonna continue to saponify and warm up. And what you'll see on these loaves is you'll start to see gel happening. So you definitely want to be home and keep an eye on them. You'll start to see it usually on the outside of the bars, or sorry, not the bars, the loaves. The color will sort of start to change, and eventually the entire loaf will be the same color. So that's what you're looking for. And I originally said to put them together, but I think I'm going to separate them a bit because they're really, really hot. Once gel starts happening and you see it happening, and then you kind of see the gel go through evenly across the entire soap or the entire mold, that's when you know you're ready to cut. And this will also feel hard to the touch. We'll go over that in a little bit when we come back in about 45 minutes to an hour. See you then. All right, so we have our loaves here and they are all ready to cut. While these were sitting in the kitchen, we took a few photos so that you can see gel phase. Basically, it starts off with just a little bit of a darker patch in the center of the loaf, and then that patch kind of expands as time goes on. And after 45 minutes, the loaves reached full gel, and now we're here back in the studio with our loaves of soap. Now, these are still warm, very warm to the touch, and if I put my finger on top, I can tell that the soap has hardened up quite a lot. So we want to make sure that we cut these now while they're still warm, because the cutter will be able to slice through these really easily, especially the wire cutters. Whereas if we wait too long, we're not going to be able to get through the soap. Now, if you do end up waiting too long and you can't cut through, then make sure that you don't cut with your wire cutter because you'll probably break some strings, and just try to go through with a butcher knife or something like that. Just get them cut as quickly as possible. All right, so we are going to unmold these and cut them right away. Sometimes they're a little bit hard to get out of these boxes. If you have these exact same molds, it's nice to use the liners that don't fit super duper tight inside the mold. It's nice if there's a little bit of room. Now, you'll see that this bends a little bit. That's normal and it's a good thing. So take that off. So some of the liners that I have fit really, really tight inside my wooden molds. So I made sure to pick ones that had a little bit of extra room, because then it's just a little easier to get the mold out. All right. So now it's kind of the first little test. I'm going to pull the edges of the mold, and if they come off beautifully like this one just did, then that's a good sign, because it means that you're ready to go. This one's a little bit stickier. It's okay. The edges of your salt bars don't have to be perfect. I think it's still good enough to go. Now, if you do this and you find that it's not ready to go, then you can actually just let this sit like this for a little bit longer before you cut. And in fact, now that I'm looking at this a little more closely, I might let these sit for maybe 15 minutes before we go ahead and cut, just to be sure that they're sturdy enough and will unmold properly. So we're going to do that and come right back. Okay, we're back. So I decided to go ahead and unmold one just to see if it's ready. And you can see from the overhead camera that the bottom looks pretty good, but the sides are a little bit rough. And in fact, there's quite a bit of soap left in the mold here, which is unfortunate. I probably unmolded it a little bit too early, but because sea salt bars are kind of rustic looking, it's gonna be just fine. So anyway, this one is ready to cut, and we'll unmold the other one. One of the sides actually unmolded really nicely, and then the rest did not. I usually turn the sea salt bars like this, and then just gently take the top off so that the corners don't break off. There we go. That one looks much nicer, actually. All right. So, again, these loaves are very kind of squishy. They kind of remind me of a sponge almost. That's sort of what it feels like. And some of the soap is still kind of malleable, so if you have some bits that are sticking up, you can just kind of press them down, get them back in position. I'm definitely not a perfectionist when it comes to soap. It's still gonna wash just as well. All right, so here's our cutter. I already got the strings set up, and we have our curing rack here, or not our curing rack, our curing tray. So I'm gonna put the bars right on there. I'm much more concerned about making sure that the bars get cut in time than I am about these perfect edges. And once this is cut into bars, each edge won't be so bad. Get our loaf on there. I'm going to turn it sideways and line it up. All right, here we go. And this should cut really easily. Yep, super easy. And the bars look quite nice. All right, so get these on the rack. So I think the key with these is, you know, making sure that you cut them in time, but if they are kind of sticking to the mold like that, just either wait a little bit longer, but don't wait too long, because then you might end up with bars that you can't actually cut very easily. Sometimes those silicone molds, especially if you're using the kind that aren't in a wooden box, are going to be really, really sticky. These Nurture soap molds are quite good for that. So, and then the soaps that we had in the cavity molds, which I have sitting right here, they're actually quite hard, and it is really tempting to try and unmold them right now. But if you do, the exact same thing will happen that just happened when we unmolded from the Loaf mold. It's going to end up, you know, the pattern that's on the bottom of these is not going to come out really well. So try to resist the urge to unmold them early. Wait, I would say wait even 2 full days, 48 hours before unmolding those. And then they will look really nice, and you'll be able to see your design really, really well. So we'll finish cutting this one, and then I'll cut the other one off camera, because you probably don't need to see me cutting 2 loaves of soap. But these turned out really nice. We're going to have these available for sale eventually. We're going to make a whole bunch more of these bars. We're going to make a lavender, some more citrus. We're going to make peppermint eucalyptus, and I think that's it, just those 3 kinds. Right now we are working through a drum of olive oil that is almost completely full. Not olive oil, sorry, coconut oil. That's why we decided to make some of these really coconut oil heavy soaps. All right, well, I hope that you enjoyed the video. I hope you understand how sea salt soaps are made now. If you've never made them before, I would really recommend that you try. Remember to start in the cavity molds maybe the first time until you get used to the recipe, kind of see how it sets up, and then give it a try in a loaf mold and let me know how it goes. All right, until next time, bye.